Thank you to my patrons. Your generosity and commitment to my work is astonishing. I sincerely appreciate it. Guys, this is not difficult to do. This is not difficult at all. And again, this serves as rather compelling evidence to me, especially speaking as a magician. This serves as compelling evidence that the makers of this video are attempting to hoodwink people. They're attempting to fool people, perhaps for monetary gain, perhaps for virality, perhaps for just attention. I don't know. I'm not a psychologist, so there's no point in me psychologizing them. I just think it's very obvious that these people are interested in deceiving the public. And all I can say is that it's not going to work on me. Hey everybody, Magic Skeptic here, and don't worry, the video is about to begin. I just wanted to take a moment to make you aware of my Patreon, the link for which can be found in the description below. Sign up today for as little as £3 per month and you can gain access to a plethora of perks and extras, including downloadable audio-only and ad-free versions of my podcast that you can listen to on the go. You can also have your question answered in a monthly video, and better still, depending on which tier you choose, you could even sit down for a Skype call with yours truly, Magic Skeptic. All that is available and much, much more. All you got to do is click the link in the description below. I hope to see you there. Hey everybody, Magic Skeptic here, and you're all most welcome to another episode of
A Magician's Thoughts Halloween Special.
I love it. I absolutely love it. Halloween. It's Halloween, folks. Happy Halloween. Happy effing Halloween. I absolutely love this time of year. This is the third episode in my Halloween series. This is the final one, I'm afraid to say. We're about to enter November at the time of recording, so happy Halloween, folks. And so to close out this trifecta of Halloween episodes, I wanted to spend one more episode delving into the world of the paranormal. In part one, if you haven't checked it out, I looked at an article from nothing less than a property or home website, a website that specializes in, you know, kind of designs, wallpaper, style, all this kind of stuff in relation to houses and apartments. Shockingly enough, on that website, I found an article including no less than 5 signs that your property might be haunted. Suffice to say, that article was lacking in the evidential department. In the second episode, guys, we followed the mysterious and fallacious world of ghost hunting, and we saw nothing. Just a lot of people running around in the dark, freaking themselves out. That's the reason I wanted to do this video, to close out my hat trick, if you will, of Halloween episodes, because, and viewer discretion is advised here, this video is going to feature so-called real footage of the paranormal, guys. So in this video, you're going to see some genuinely creepy stuff. Objects moving without people touching them and that sort of thing. So-called spirits or entities being caught on film. Orbs. Stuff that you can actually see. In my previous 2 videos, we were either talking about the paranormal or looking at people claiming that they've heard something or see something, but I mean, we never actually saw anything ourselves as viewers. This video is going to be very different in that regard. So again, viewer discretion is advised. If you're creeped out by this sort of stuff and this sort of stuff comes between you and your night's sleep, this video contains some genuinely unsettling imagery. That said, rest assured, don't click away just yet, because as I said in my previous video, watching this video might actually be very beneficial for you, because as you'd expect on a channel called The Magic Skeptic, I, the Magic Skeptic, am going to debunk each and every example of so-called paranormal phenomena in the footage. I've even gone so far as to duplicate and replicate the actual paranormal activity myself. Yes, folks, you heard that right. In this video that we're going to watch, I have created my own version of each supposedly paranormal event. I've recreated them in my very own home. So at the very least, you're going to see that the contents of the footage can be duplicated by a person using nothing other than naturalistic means. So without further ado, guys, we're going to dive into this video. We're going to watch each alleged example of paranormal activity, and I'm going to debunk it, offer some naturalistic explanations, and finish in each and every case with a replication of that supposed paranormal activity that I have filmed in my very own home. So if you're ready, guys, and you want to learn how this stuff can be faked, if you want to understand how this can be achieved through purely naturalistic means, let's dive right in. I hope you enjoy it.
Weird. Oh my gosh. The surface isn't wet or anything, it's all dry, so there's no reason for it to be moving. And it's moving again.
Creepy, right? What do you think? Are you now a believer in paranormal phenomenon? Are you now a believer in paranormal phenomena, plural, right? I will admit, guys, and I've admitted this all throughout this Halloween series of episodes, I am creeped out by stuff like this. Admittedly, that doesn't mean, however, that it's true. It's always frustrating to me when people say, oh, but what about your skepticism? I thought you were, Mr. Rationality. Why would you be creeped out by this? Well, guys, I mean, it's weird what happens in the video, and they couple it with some creepy music, and the person who's recording the video isn't doing a bad job of performing, and therein lies the problem. In my humble estimation, this is just a performance, guys. It's not often that I will accuse people who believe in supernatural phenomena or people who have witness supernatural phenomena. It's not often that I will accuse them of deception. Normally, there's a naturalistic explanation for these kinds of things that the experiencer simply misunderstands or misidentifies and comes to the mistaken conclusion that something supernatural has occurred. The most obvious example that comes to mind is prayer, right? So somebody prays for their loved one to get better. Let's imagine their loved one has a terminal illness. You pray for them and then suddenly they recover, they go into remission or whatnot. I totally understand how the person who said the prayer there might become convinced that their prayer was the thing that cured their loved one. But of course, there are many naturalistic explanations. First of all, there are illnesses that include the possibility of just, recovering randomly, remission in cases of cancer, for example. And given the, relative ubiquity of religiosity, it's not surprising that every now and then a prayer will coincidentally align with a remission case, right? Because both prayer and cancer, I'm afraid to say, are rather common. So the odds of those two things overlapping, remission and a prayer, are obviously quite high. So there's a perfectly rational, naturalistic explanation for how a prayer can coalesce with a cure. In this particular case, guys, and just because I can't think of one doesn't mean there isn't one, by the way, but I can't think of a naturalistic explanation outside of the bounds of deception, hence my allegation of deception. If you want to know what I think is going on here, I think the recorder of the video and the person who's speaking in the background, I think it's a performance. I think this is an example of out and out deception. But before I say any more about that, let me show you my version of this exact phenomenon that I recorded in my very own kitchen. Have a look. So as you can see, this phenomenon can be duplicated by a skeptical, non-believing person such as myself. The question is, how did I do it? How did they do it? And is there any evidence that the way they did it is similar to the way I did it? Well, let's take those questions seriously for a moment. First of all, this effect is achieved rather easily using a substance known as invisible thread. Yes, folks, it's true. Magicians and con artists and those who want to deceive the public have been using invisible thread for centuries. This is an actual real substance that exists. Needless to say, it's not actually invisible, but it's just very, very difficult to see in most lighting conditions. If you take a look at the picture that I'm putting on screen right now, you can see it in its original form. When you buy it, it isn't invisible, but those black threads that you can see in the image are separable, and when you separate a single thread from the collection of threads, it is so impossible to see that it's actually creepy. And so you can make objects move or make it appear like they're moving without touching them. Now, why am I tempted to conclude that the person in this video is using invisible thread? Well, as I said earlier, guys, I'm not able to think of another possibility here. Now, again, that doesn't mean that they're definitely using invisible thread. I don't want to be accused of erecting an argument from ignorance fallacy, which would be the idea that because I can't think of a better explanation, therefore it must be my assertion. So I'm not asserting that invisible thread explains this. All I'm asserting is that invisible thread can explain this. I can't think of another naturalistic explanation for this phenomenon. I think it would just be patronizing and nonsensical for me to start talking about slip streams of wind and so on. This video was clearly filmed indoors. The idea that there would be a draft strong enough to make a cup move in exactly this fashion seems nonsensical to me. The idea that there would be some kind of other naturalistic explanation, like maybe the surface was wet, as you heard in the video, or maybe the surface is at a slant, which is causing the cup to move, and gravity is the explanation. All of these, given the context, seem remarkably uncompelling, which leads me to the conclusion, given the fact that my replication of the phenomenon is so eerily similar, my best guess, and again, not an assertion, I'm not making an argument from ignorance fallacy, I'm not saying that because I can't think of anything better, therefore it must be invisible thread. I'm just giving you my best hypothesis. My hypothesis for how this was achieved is using invisible thread. In other words, I think that the recorder of the video is engaging in a deception. Their goal is to fool the viewer into believing that paranormal activity is real. Now, can I prove that with certainty? Absolutely not. Can I demonstrate it with even reasonable, accuracy? Again, no. All I'm trying to do in this video, guys, is demonstrate that the phenomenon we saw in the footage can be replicated by someone using purely naturalistic means. At the very least, I would argue that this means that the footage itself cannot be used as confirmatory evidence for the existence of the supernatural. The fact that the phenomenon can be replicated through purely naturalistic means that the footage on its own is not enough to prove ghosts. Now, is it possible that my footage is just a clever duplication and what's happening in the video is real? That this woman is actually capturing genuine paranormal phenomena on camera? You can argue that that's possible. Fair enough. And if you want to believe that, folks, off you go. All I'm saying at this juncture is that I'm not convinced that this woman has caught paranormal activity on camera because I can duplicate it with purely naturalistic means. At the very least, if we were going to conclude that this was good evidence, further investigation would be required. I hope that makes sense, dear listener. And with that example investigated, explored, and critiqued, let's move on to the next spooky example. Disturbing, right? Oh man, I'm getting the chills while watching this video here and now. Okay, this is a very interesting one, I have to say. That pillow looks like it really achieved flight. And I'm going to be honest, when I show you my version in a moment, my version didn't even come close to achieving the exact same phenomenon. But again, I achieved something in the ballpark, and so that's fine. But guys, looking at this footage, I think it's entirely possible that this was achieved with fishing line or invisible thread once again. It's quite unlikely that it was invisible thread in this case, given the fact that the pillow really gets yanked into the air, and if you are a magician who's watching this, you'll know that invisible thread is truly quite delicate, and so it's very unlikely that you could achieve this kind of outcome using invisible thread. However, at a distance, fishing line can achieve this effect, and it can achieve it very, very easily, and it can't be seen, especially when the footage is black and white and in the darkness. And on that note, take a look at my duplication and tell me what you think. So as you can see, my version doesn't achieve the flight that we saw in the footage, but truth be told, I didn't actually have much fishing line. I only had about this much, a very, very short amount of fishing line, and I had that because I had a little magician's magic kit, and it included a small bit of fishing line for another magic effect. So if I had had a longer piece of fishing line and I was able to do the hookup with a longer bit of string, I would have been able to achieve the effect you saw in the video. So at no point am I conceding or admitting that it's not possible to achieve the effect in the video using purely naturalistic means. I'm just pointing out that I was limited by the amount of fishing line I had. And if you take a look at the footage, the explanation footage, that is, of how I achieved the effect, you'll actually get a bit of a laugh. You can see that I'm actually so close to the pillow with the fishing line attached to it that I'm almost on camera, which is why I had to heavily crop the footage. Now, if I had had longer fishing line, I would have been able to stand much further back, and I would have been able to jimmy a hookup where the fishing line came from above, maybe wrapped it around a bar or a lamp at the top of the room, or some kind of a curtain pole, and if I yanked that, I would have been able to get the taking flight effect. But look, again, short notice, I didn't have time to go out and purchase some fishing line. I only had a very small amount, so I achieved an effect that's in the ballpark. And suffice to say, folks, if I was to present this video without the explanation, and if I was to couple it with the creepy music and post it to one of these paranormal pages, or post it and it went viral, how long do you think it would be before it appeared on this channel? Again, the channel known as Story Trender, and then people would be commenting on it and using it as legitimate evidence of the paranormal. Again, my only goal here is to demonstrate that these phenomena, these so-called paranormal phenomena, can be duplicated by a person whose intent is to deceive the public. And you know, I leave it in your capable hands, dear listener. Do you think that this footage serves as compelling evidence of the supernatural? I was able to duplicate the footage, you know, within reason. I was able to get in the ballpark. And so I can't, again, think of a naturalistic explanation outside of deception here. Again, that doesn't mean that deception is the explanation. I'm not going to be accused of an argument from ignorance fallacy. I am not suggesting that because I cannot think of a better explanation, that therefore fishing line is the explanation. I'm merely pointing out that fishing line is a possible explanation, and that it's possible to achieve the exact same effect. David Hume's thinking on this, I think, is quite good. David Hume suggests that we should always reject the greater miracle. In other words, the naturalistic explanation always has a higher intrinsic probability of being true, because the naturalistic explanation doesn't require that we suspend our understanding of reality. In other words, with this pillow example, deception is a more likely explanation than a ghost throwing it across the room, because to take the ghost explanation or hypothesis seriously is to completely upturn our understanding of reality. It is to come to the conclusion that a metaphysical or non-physical entity can move objects using a form of spiritual or non-physical energy. This is completely ludicrous, and there's no evidence for it whatsoever. And if you want to call this video evidence for it, despite the fact that I can replicate it with purely naturalistic means, albeit deception, then I don't know what to tell you, folks. But yeah, if anybody is still convinced that this pillow example is genuine evidence of the paranormal, please do jump into the comments below and let me know why you're so convinced. I'd be fascinated to hear from you. Other than that, let's move on to the next example. Finally, we get to an example of so-called paranormal activity that I can actually offer a naturalistic explanation for, that doesn't require that I call the creators of the video liars or deceivers. Believe it or not, I'm incredibly happy about that fact. So, with this example, I think wind is a very obvious explanation. A very obvious explanation. Now, just to anticipate a particular objection, you might be tempted to say, dear listener, that wind is an uncompelling explanation because nothing else in the image appears to be acting as though it is under the influence of wind. Fair enough. But again, you can't see the entire image here. You can only see the shot. You can't see outside the bounds of the shot. So I suppose I shouldn't say that you can't see the whole image. You can see the whole image, but you can't see beyond the edges of the image. Now, here's my thinking. It's entirely possible that to the left of this image, assuming the wind is blowing from the left, it's entirely possible that there are, say, two houses that have a gap between them. So they're not terraced houses, they're not semi-detached, they're just two separate detached houses, and the wind would only be able to blow between them, assuming the wind was coming from that direction, which would narrow the wind into a particular slipstream. Now, it's entirely possible that the chair is within the trajectory of that slipstream of wind, so we would see the chair blowing, but perhaps not objects left and right of it, or objects in the foreground or background. Now, you might say that that's a rather extensive, over-the-top explanation. I don't happen to think that it is, but if you feel that way, fine. I'm just pointing out that it's possible that this is wind. Other than that, again, I have to bring up my old friend deception. Deception is entirely possible here. Now, again, I was limited with the tools that I had at my disposal, but here is my replication of the moving chair effect. I had to do it indoors, again, because of limitations and so forth, but have a look at the following and we'll meet back here in a moment to discuss it. So, as you can see, the chair moves across the kitchen without anybody touching it, and therefore the phenomenon is replicated. Now, this is the first example where I think there might actually be a genuine difference between how I've replicated the effect and what actually happens in the footage. But again, that's not actually the key point here. Even if I'm not using the same methodology to replicate these examples of paranormal activity, I'm still proving the point that it's possible to replicate them using purely naturalistic means. If an effect can be duplicated, this shines some kind of light on it in terms of the skeptic's mindset. It demonstrates at the very least that seeing the effect is not enough to confirm that it's genuine or to confirm the existence of ghosts or the paranormal. In this case, I achieved the effect using fishing line, but again, because I was so lacking in the tools department, I didn't have enough fishing line. In fact, the piece of fishing line that I used for the pillow effect is the same piece of fishing line I used for this chair. The fishing line wasn't long enough for me to be able to achieve the chair effect and also not have me in the shot. So I had to do some clever camera trickery here. I had to duplicate a clean version of the shot without me in it, and I overlaid the clean plate without me in the image over top the footage of me yanking the chair in order to hide myself from the shot. As you'll have seen on screen, folks, there's a version of the shot where I made the layer that's pasted over the top transparent so that you can actually see me there in the shot yanking the chair. So I achieved this with a combination of fishing line and camera trickery. I'm not saying that that's how the effect is achieved in the video itself. Maybe they've done an overlay shot, maybe they haven't, or maybe they just had much more fishing line than I did, because if you have a long enough piece of fishing line, again, it's a very strong substance, you could be standing halfway across the garden and yank on the chair. You could have two people, a piece of fishing line going that direction, a piece of fishing line going that direction. One person yanks it this way, the other person yanks it that way. Neither of them are in the shot, and of course the fishing line won't show up in the shot because it's very difficult to see in the darkness, especially when the shot is so far away from the chair. So again, I'm just pointing out, guys, that it's possible to achieve this effect through purely naturalistic means. Could this footage be genuine evidence of the paranormal? Maybe. But again, going back to Hume, as far as I'm concerned, the naturalistic explanation, even if it involves deception or a clever camera trick, is a much higher likelihood in terms of an explanation. It's got a much higher intrinsic probability of being true compared with the paranormal or supernatural explanation. But again, dear listener, and as per usual, I'll leave it to you. What do you think? Other than that, let's move on to the next example. This has got to be the lamest example in the list of paranormal activity. The shot is clearly obscuring the room. So it's entirely possible that somebody is just standing behind the wall and slams the door shut, right? Take a look at my duplication and see how easy this is to fake. Shout out to Becky there, my fiance.
There is a ghost. It's Becky. And that's how you fake a haunting.
She's a great sport. She came home from work one day and I was just sitting in the kitchen with fishing lines, sellotape, chairs, all of the drawers were open, the presses were open, and I was just absolutely going at it arts and crafts style like a 5-year-old. I'd made a complete mess. She walked in and she was like, "What the fuck are you doing?" Some women come home to discover their men working out. Other women come home to discover their men playing the PlayStation. Other women come home to discover their men playing with their... My fiance comes home to discover me creating a fake haunting in our very own home. And then, to top it all off, she gets involved, and it's not the only piece of footage she's involved in. Stick around later in the video and you'll see Becky crop up once again. So thank you very much, Becky. I really do appreciate you helping me out. You're awesome. So again, guys, as you can see, it's totally easy to do the slamming door effect, even if no one was in the shot. Let's say the shot was taken from another angle where you can see the entire room and nobody could be hiding behind the door or hiding behind the wall. Even then, it would just open back up the possibility of fishing line, yanking the door. There's so many naturalistic possibilities for how this effect is achieved that I find it to be, quite honestly, the least compelling example of paranormal activity on the list. And on that note, actually, why don't you tell me, dear listener, jump into the comments below and let me know which example of paranormal activity, by the end of the video, of course, let me know which example of paranormal activity you found the most difficult to so-called explain away. Which example did you find the most difficult to explain in terms of naturalistic phenomena? You know, which one of them was the most convincing, in other words? Which one of them really made you pause for thought and think, oh goodness, might that be evidence of the paranormal? Because I totally get the feeling. I mean, I watched this video the very first time and I was so creeped out by the end of it that I actually debated whether or not I wanted to watch it again or whether or not I wanted to make a video about it because it creeped me out so badly. But I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below about which example of paranormal activity you found to be the most convincing, or at the very least, the most creepy. But with the door example acknowledged, let's move on to the next one. This example of the moving object on the table is remarkably similar to the moving cup that we watched at the beginning of the video, so I'm not going to spend any time on this. All of my thoughts from the moving cup example apply equally to this particular example. So with that acknowledged, let's move on to the next one. Similarly, I won't spend much time on this one. It's another example of a moving door. It's quite possible, just like with the previous example of the moving door, that somebody is just behind that bar moving it with their hand. It's also entirely possible, if a person isn't behind the bar, that this is just a fishing line case. Again, I find this quite uncompelling. It's not the most convincing example on the list, so let's move on to the next one. The next one is sure to startle you, by the way, so brace yourself, folks. Let's dive right in. For me, this is probably the most fascinating example on the list. I really, really love this one, and I had a great deal of fun recreating it. And again, guys, this can be very easily recreated. So before I say anything else about this example, let's have a look at Becky's second guest appearance in this episode and watch as her invisible self follows her up the stairs. So, as you can see, this can be duplicated, and I'm afraid to say I have to point this out once again. I think this example of footage is a very blatant case of deception. Whoever made this video knew how to do some video editing and knew how to do some camera tricks, because this is very easily achieved. Again, just look at my explanation. As you can see there in the editing pane, all I've done is layer one shot on top of the other. It is in fact the exact same shot, but if you lay them one on top of the other and dial up the opacity of the shot that's on top and misalign them, then you can get this effect where one entity follows another. Admittedly, it looks quite creepy, but it can be achieved with very simple editing. This isn't Spielbergian level filmmaking. This shot isn't difficult to accomplish. It's a great deal of fun to accomplish. After my fiance and I achieved this effect, after I filmed it and I laid the footage one on top of the other and dialed up the opacity, when we watched it back for the first time, the two of us had an actual proper reaction. We both went, oh, because it looks so creepy, right? And you could do the exact same thing with the cat in this footage. You can just lay one shot on top of another, misalign them, and dial up the opacity of the shot that's laying on top, and you get this creepy, ghostly effect. But please notice that in the video, dear listener, they added a story about this cat's friend who the cat still plays with, right? By adding that kind of element, it makes it sound creepier, it makes it sound more real. Obviously, in the footage of Becky walking across the shot, it's obviously Becky herself, but if I were to just lay this on top and then put out this video and say that this woman lost her twin, but her twin still follows her around, that her twin is her guardian angel, right? If I allege that she had a twin and put this footage out there, the paranormal community would go nuts for this stuff. They would love it, and people would be creeped out by it if I added the scary music and so on. So guys, come on. It's totally possible to achieve this through naturalistic means. Does that mean the footage we just saw is definitely fake? No. Again, I'm not going to commit that argument from ignorance fallacy. At no point am I going to say that because I can't think of a better explanation that therefore my method of achieving it is true. Again, all I can say is that given the fact that it's possible to replicate this phenomenon using purely naturalistic means and just some very simple editing by overlaying shots, misaligning them and dialing up the opacity, at the very least that should give anybody who uses this kind of footage as evidence for the supernatural, at the very least it should give those folks pause for thought and pause for reflection on whether or not the footage that they're deploying is evidence, and whether or not it really counts, in other words. And so look, with that acknowledged, let's move on to the next example. Everything about the movement of that spoon screams invisible thread. It screams, the exact movement of the spoon screams invisible thread. You can even tell where the thread hookup is. The thread hookup is at the end of the spoon. You can see it with the way the spoon arches up, and it even spins on a swivel because whoever's holding the invisible thread is doing this to cause it to move that way. Everything about this footage is very obvious to me. Nothing about this serves as confirmation for the supernatural. And again, if you don't believe me, take a look at my footage. I didn't manage to achieve the spinning effect because, truth be told, and this is how delicate the thread is, the thread actually broke in the middle of me recording this footage, and I just wasn't bothered securing another piece of invisible thread because it takes a bit of time to separate it from the thread spool. So in any case, my imperfect recreation achieves more or less a similar effect. Take a look. And as you can see, the effect can be duplicated rather easily with some invisible thread and a camera. Guys, this is not difficult to do. This is not difficult at all. And again, this serves as rather compelling evidence to me, especially speaking as a magician. This serves as compelling evidence that the makers of this video are attempting to hoodwink people. They're attempting to fool people, perhaps for monetary gain, perhaps for virality, perhaps for just attention. I don't know. I'm not a psychologist, so there's no point in me psychologizing them. I just think it's very obvious that these people are interested in deceiving the public. And all I can say is that it's not going to work on me. I think it's incredibly obvious that this effect is achieved with invisible thread. The exact behavior of the spoon demonstrates that, and I defy anybody to come up with a better explanation. Again, I'm not saying that I know for sure, but I'm pretty damn certain. I'm 99% sure that this is an invisible thread example. And yeah, with that acknowledged, you can disagree if you want, dear listener. If you do, jump into the comments below, let me know why. But other than that, I'm not going to give this any more time. It doesn't deserve it. Let's move on to the next example.
Hey guys, just wanted to catch this. These were moving. I wasn't tripping. They were definitely moving. There you go. See? I knew I saw it. I don't know if you can see that.
You know what I'm going to say, right? You know what the buzzword of this video is going to be. In fact, it will be a fun drinking game. I think every single time I say the phrase invisible thread, you guys should take a shot. Only if you're of age. Only if you're of age. I'm absolutely not at all recommending that anybody underage do that. A shot of apple juice. There you go. Shot of apple juice. Magic Skeptic does not condone underagers doing anything that is outside the bounds of the law. In fact, Magic Skeptic doesn't, encourage anybody to do anything outside the bounds of the law, no matter what age you are. So just remember that. Safety first, folks. Follow the law. I'm not going to get into that trouble. The last thing I want to do is end up in the courtroom as an influencer that got somebody injured. So no, don't. You know what? Let's just subtract that entire comment. Let's not do a drinking game, okay? No shots. No, forget about it. It just happens to be the case that I say invisible thread a lot in this video, but that's because invisible thread is involved in so many of these, and this one is no different. This one is no different. I mean, come on. Is it not obvious at this point? If it isn't, take a look at my footage and see what you think.
Becky! Becky!
What?
It's happening again. Look at the flowers.
What? I don't see anything.
You missed it. Watch.
Oh, jeez. What the hell?
Similar, eh? What do you think? Again, guys, these phenomena can be duplicated rather easily with a camera and some invisible thread. So I have to say, I find this one, again, very uncompelling. I think my deception hypothesis grows more likely with each passing phenomenon. And so, again, I'll leave it up to you, dear listener, but I'm not at all convinced here. I think this is another invisible thread trick. It's so easy to do. As you can see, I replicated it quite easily and with a little bit of rather lackluster acting, I must admit. But were I to post this on a paranormal page, I guarantee you that if I were to maintain that this is genuine footage and that I'm creeped out by it, I'd get all of the paranormal folks sympathizing with me and reposting it and using it as an example of genuine paranormal phenomena. But in any case, you've got enough to make up your own mind, dear listener. Suffice to say, I'm not convinced. Let's move on. And before long, we were always going to get to the example of orbs. This is a very, very common thing in the paranormal community. They allege that these orbs are kind of like spirit beings, ghosts, the soul, this kind of thing. Again, all I can tell you guys is that it's possible to duplicate this phenomenon using deception. Take a look at my example and see what you think. Now, you might not believe how I created this phenomenon, folks, but suffice to say, a ball of tissue, some fishing line, and some very basic editing where I laid one piece of footage on top of the other, and you can achieve this exact effect. And so, yeah, I just took a clean plate of the stairs, then I did the version with the fishing line and the ball of tissue. I laid one piece of footage on top of the other and I dialed up the opacity, some black and white effects and some grain, and suddenly you've got a creepy looking effect. And so while it might not be the exact way that they've created this effect, I think it's more than easy to duplicate this effect. But I will say that there is a possible naturalistic explanation here. Sometimes when a piece of dust goes by the front of a lens, it can look like an orb, and it's possible for cameras to have audio-visual glitches and so on that can produce this phenomenon as well. There are naturalistic explanations, so perhaps I should give them a free pass here and just say that they've caught something on camera for real here, and that it's just a natural phenomenon rooted in the camera itself, or rooted in the camera's interfacing with the environment, or a piece of dust. All of these are possibilities. I'm just pointing out that it's also possible to create this effect using nothing other than deception. Suffice to say, I would find all of those explanations infinitely more compelling compared with the idea that it's an actual ghost, spirit, or some kind of metaphysical entity that's wandering around the house in the shape of an orb. Oh, anyway, again, dear listener, you can make up your own mind, but let's move on to the next example. I won't spend too much time on this example because we've already discussed it with the cat. Any of these examples of a ghostly figure or some kind of an entity walking by but looking quite faint, these are all very easily achieved using the overlay editing technique that I've already described. And so it's entirely possible that this phenomenon is achieved in the same way. I would just say that this one is so amorphous that it is entirely possible that this is another kind of a camera glitch, some kind of an audio, or not audio, but a visual error, something of that nature. So I'm not going to say a whole pile on this one because all of the comments that I made on the cat apparition example apply here in equal measure. So with that acknowledged, let's move on. And this last example, truth be told, I haven't attempted to duplicate because I didn't want to destroy my kitchen. So yes, this example can be achieved using a combination of some of the effects that we've spoken about already in this video. Clearly, fishing line can be used to yank bottles off of the surface or yank bottles from the overhead holders and so on. The shot from the front of the bar, it's quite trivial really. Somebody could be behind the bar chucking bottles and so on. Again, it's very easy to create all of these effects and duplicate them in a purely naturalistic, albeit deceptive manner. So again, I don't find this last example very compelling. Did you, dear listener? And speaking of which, did you find any of these examples of paranormal phenomena convincing? Because we have reached the end of this video, and sadly, we have reached the end of our Halloween series of videos. I love Halloween, guys. I love doing a deep dive on paranormal, ghostly stuff every single Halloween. I did 3 Halloween videos last year as well, which you can check out. You know what? I'll put them in the description box below if you want to check out those videos. I'll put the links there if you want to access them easily and quickly. But yeah, I really love Halloween. I love the paranormal. I love horror movies. The whole sense of, spookiness around Halloween is something that I really enjoy, and I hope you enjoy it as well, dear listener. And if you're not a big fan of Halloween, at the very least, I hope you enjoyed this last 3 weeks of videos where I've gone through various paranormal claims, ghost hunters, paranormal activity, and so on, and done my best to debunk those things. As I said, please jump into the comments and let me know which example of the paranormal you found the most compelling. And alternatively, if you found none of them compelling like myself, then maybe you should jump into the comments below and tell me which one you thought was the worst, which one you thought was the weakest, which one you thought was the least convincing. Other than that, if you want to support the channel and you're able to do so, in other words, if you believe in my mission and you're in a financial position in order to be able to support me, please do consider becoming a patron today. And you can do that by jumping into the description box below and hitting the link to my Patreon page. When you get there, you can sign up for as little as £3 per month, and for that £3 you can gain access to a plethora of perks, bonuses and extras. Thank you very much for watching this video, and I wish you a very, very happy Halloween. And until next time, bye bye.